What's up, RotoBallers? Welcome back to the channel. My name is Jorden Hill, and I'm back from vacation to discuss some fantasy football disappointments from Week 10. Before we get into it, make sure you subscribe to the channel to keep getting advice as we rapidly approach the fantasy playoffs. Let's kick things off with a player from the Thursday night game. It's running back Cordero Patterson of the Atlanta Falcons. We talked about two of Patterson's teammates 3 weeks ago, Drake London and Kyle Pitts, and I'll be honest, I really don't understand what Atlanta is trying to do with some of its best offensive weapons this season. Patterson returned from a stint on the IR in Week 9 and picked up right where he left off, scoring 2 touchdowns and finishing as a top 10 fantasy running back against the Los Angeles Chargers. This week, he had another good matchup against the Carolina Panthers, but saw only 5 carries, the same amount as Caleb Huntley and 3 less than rookie Tyler Algier. The veteran really did nothing with his touches as the Falcons lost this important divisional matchup. After seemingly unlocking Patterson for fantasy purposes last season, it's really confusing to see head coach Arthur Smith choose to barely utilize him in this game. I'm personally not going to panic quite yet. I'm willing to roll with Patterson again next week in another good matchup against the Chicago Bears. The Bears have been one of the 5 easiest matchups for fantasy running backs this season. If Patterson gets limited work again though and is really just involved on special teams, it might be time to bench him in Week 12. The last running back I'd like to mention is Leonard Fournette of the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Fournette salvaged his fantasy day in Germany with a rushing touchdown before exiting early with a hip injury, but the most concerning thing for Fournette when the team returns from its Week 11 bye is rookie running back Rachaad White stealing his job. Fournette has been extremely inefficient all season long, and White has looked like the more explosive runner. He had the best game so far in his young career on Sunday morning as he topped 100 yards for the first time. White even got the start in this game, and the two backs' opportunities were nearly dead even early on. I think this indicates that Tampa Bay has lost confidence in Fournette as their lead guy. I definitely don't recommend cutting Fournette, and I wouldn't label him as a must bench quite yet either. But I do think it's important for fantasy managers to monitor reports throughout the team's bye week to see if they can get any more information regarding his health and what this backfield split is going to look like starting in Week 12. All I'm saying is, don't be surprised if Rachaad White becomes a fantasy league winner while Fournette is relegated to backup duties. Moving over to the wide receiver position, I'm sure a lot of you are wondering what to do with Brandon Cooks. Cooks has been an underrated and undervalued fantasy wide receiver for the course of his career, but it just hasn't panned out in 2022 as his frustrations with the Texans have become widely known. The 29-year-old wideout was reportedly a hot commodity at the NFL trade deadline, but ultimately remained in Houston and missed the following game due to personal reasons. He returned in Week 10, but was out-targeted and outperformed by Nico Collins, as Cooks turned 7 targets into just 4 receptions for 37 yards. At this point, it's safe to say that Dameon Pierce is the only reliable fantasy option on the Texans roster, and it's time to bench Brandon Cooks in all formats. I'd prefer to hold on to him just in case he's able to turn things around, but if there's someone on your waivers that's been producing, I think it's okay to cut bait with Cooks. I hate to mention 2 Buccaneers in the same video, but a lot of the bigger names at wide receiver came through for fantasy this week. So let's briefly talk about Mike Evans. Evans has now posted 2 consecutive outings with fewer than 10 half PPR fantasy points, and he hasn't found the end zone since Week 3. Touchdowns have been the calling card for Evans over his entire career, and in 2 full seasons with Tom Brady at quarterback, Evans has had 14 and 13 touchdowns. This year, through 10 games, he only has 3. A lot of the hype going into the season that made Evans a top 12 fantasy wide receiver according to ADP was due to the fact that Chris Godwin was still recovering from a torn ACL he suffered late last season. Godwin finally seems to be back to 100%, and it's definitely having an effect on Evans' output. Truthfully though, this is the guy Evans has been in years past. He'll have his fair share of down games, and then he'll follow them up with huge blowout performances with multiple touchdowns. As long as Godwin is seeing near double-digit targets every week, I think it's fair to say that Evans won't be as consistent as some may have hoped, but he's still a solid wide receiver 2 in your lineup that needs to be started every single week. I also struggled to find tight ends that were a major letdown in Week 10, but everyone's favorite Swiss Army knife, Taysom Hill, fits the description. We all know that Hill isn't really a tight end by conventional standards, as he hasn't seen more than 2 targets in a single game this year, but he still is a top 10 fantasy tight end due to his rushing production and 6 total touchdowns. Hill had his worst showing of the season in Week 10 against the Steelers, handling 3 carries for just 1 yard. I've said it before when discussing Kyle Pitts, and I'll say it again now, but given how bad the tight end position has been, it's generally okay to throw someone in your lineup that you think has a decent shot at scoring a touchdown. Hill does represent this on any given week, so if you're searching for upside or need a bye week fill-in, he's serviceable, but personally, I would prefer to pick up and start someone that has a safer floor and is seeing at least a few targets in the receiving game every single week. With that being said, because you generally don't want to roster 2 tight ends, it's okay to cut Taysom Hill at this point. That'll do it for this week's video. Please remember to leave a like if you enjoyed, and comment down below some players that you're starting to panic about as we head into Week 11. Thanks for tuning in, and best of luck in your fantasy matchups.